Well, hello, I am Jamie,
And I'm Mike.
and in this episode of the Bildad the Shoe Height podcast, we have decided to pull out our final thoughts on Andrew Tate, because this is a topic we've done quite a lot.
Yeah, obviously we've done the previous two episodes on the Andrew Tate phenomenon, and we could go on ad infinitum about it and constantly react to this or constantly react to that. But we thought in this episode we'll just give our final thoughts on him as an individual, and on the phenomenon, and then again how the church should respond.
That's right. So to start with, we're going to look at Tate, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and what we're going to do is we're going to limit ourselves to 1 point each on the good, the bad, and the ugly. So should we kick off with Mike?
Okay, I can start if you want.
So
yeah.
Mike, so what's good about Tate?
Well, I think generally what's good about him is he in some way, shape or form, as we've discussed before, kind of occupies that self improvement space. He does encourage individuals to improve their lives. He encourages some sort of accountability. He wants you to take accountability for your life. He says you are the reason that you have not got what you want out of life in some way, shape or form. And he seems to some way stand for also traditional masculinity.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a criticism of it could be that he's not a good man, but as we've said before, I think you're hard pushed to say that he's an unmanly man.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, what I think is good about Tate, I think he's highly articulate, which is very refreshing in a culture where excuse me, all too quickly, if somebody disagrees with you, you will get shouted down or cancelled. And I think a really good antidote to that is to put together a robust argument and to say it firmly and fairly, and to enter into debate. So I think he is very good at that.
Yeah, he is a very, very articulate individual. He's a very good vocabulary. He's very quick-witted, and obviously he can maintain a lot of information and ideas in his head. He's obviously, again, if you watch the Piers Morgan interviews where Piers really puts him under the spot, he copes with the pressure quite well. And obviously he's a provocative and prickly individual. So a lot of his kind of podcasts, where people try to put pressure on him, he's quite good at returning the fire. So he does,
like a true fighter.
Indeed,
Yes.
indeed. Well, I would also say that that's a positive thing about him as well. Obviously, kind of pointing out to the fact that he is not unmanly. Is obviously he's had 80 plus professional kickboxing fights. That it takes a lot of courage to do that. And that is quite, yes, I find it, again, as a person who's interested in combat sports and martial arts, I find that something compelling and very likable about him. But obviously that doesn't mean he's not without fault. Hence the bad,
hence
in
the bad,
in the good, the bad, the ugly. And I think I think in regards to the bad, again, try to talk about the bad without talking about the ugly, because they kind of bleed into one another. But I think just in regards to the and again, we discussed this in episode 1, is the message that he gives. It is just a little bit too shallow, I think, and to some degree he is just advocating for like an Epicurean consumerism. It's like get more money.
Is that what Epicurean means? Just get more money? Is that?
It's not limited, but it's basically like if you live an Epicurean lifestyle, you're living like a pleasure-seeking lifestyle sort of thing.
Okay, pleasure-seeking.
Yes. So yeah, it's a little bit more materialistic. Like
I'm being educated now.
Okay. Fair enough. So yeah, it's get more money, get more girls. Get nice shiny cars, and again, there's nothing wrong with getting yourself a beautiful woman. There's nothing wrong with getting yourself a nice car, and there's nothing wrong with having money in the bank. But it's there's more to life than that. So I'd say that's the bad. Obviously, we discussed in episode 1 how again, because obviously he's kind of linked in with the red pill kind of community. And he has said, as well as the red pillars commonly say, that men shouldn't get married unless they've bedded 50
Oh.
women, make 100 grand a year, and are in decent physical shape. And it's obviously, yeah, by all means, get yourself in decent physical shape. Try and make as much, try and strive for a 6-figure salary if you can get it. Then all the power to you. But yeah, betting over 50 women is certainly the worst vice in the history of advice.
Yeah.
The red pill are always harper on about how women who have had many sexual partners they find it more difficult to pair bond, and they're more likely to get divorced and so on and so forth. But that's equally true of men as well. So
Yeah. Where is the love? Where is the love in that? So, okay.
that's what I think is reasonably bad.
Bad. Okay, that's bad.
And yourself?
Okay, so for myself, there's two people I kind of have been comparing Tate to in my little mind. One of them is Jordan Peterson, and another one is a character from a Netflix sort of documentary called The Tinder Swindler. Okay, and I would put Tate pretty well halfway in between both of those people. So Jordan Peterson, many of you will have heard of him. He's from the manosphere. He does a lot of speaking on the topic of what is a man, how to get meaning out of life. He talks about morality. He also talks about spirituality, and lots of people go to him to kind of learn and to work out, who should I be, what should I do, what is good, what is bad. The Tinder Swindler is a real life story. There was a guy who set up a Tinder profile and pretended to be like the heir of a billionaire. He pretended to be like an agent who deals in diamonds or some sort of really rich person. And what he would do is he would go on Tinder and he would start relationships with beautiful and eligible young women. And he would kind of sell them this image of himself that he was young, rich and successful, always flying off on a plane somewhere to do business internationally. And that's the image of himself that he would give. And what he would always do is, once he'd established trust with these women, he would send them a story, something like he got kidnapped and his bodyguard got beaten up. He really needs £20,000 to pay for his bodyguard's hospital fees and to secure a deal because his accounts have got frozen. And then these women who were in relationships with him would pay, and then they kind of wouldn't hear from him again. So he's like the archetype of somebody who portrays a completely false image of themselves online for their own benefit. So I put Tate halfway between these two people, and the reason for that is, on my limited knowledge of Tate, as far as I can see, he's done well in fighting. So he's done well in terms of kickboxing, built himself a bit of a platform, and then he's gone on to Big Brother, which is essentially the place where people go to become famous for the sake of being famous. And then he's become more famous with his videos, which are a combination of controversy and some decent self-help life advice. But the more I've looked into Tate myself, I suppose I've become disappointed, because I think he's very good on surface level, batting off criticism which comes his way, a lot of which is actually quite unfair criticism. But when you really go a bit deeper down into his message, and also if you go deeper down into his character, which maybe we'll touch on in a minute, then actually, yeah, I've felt disappointed. And Mike, we've been saying the fact that he can be associated with the Tinder swindler personality maybe says something on its own.
Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, I think of like a chap who I particularly enjoy listening to is a Catholic bishop by the name of Bishop Barron,
Good
and
guy.
you would say like, okay, well, where does he fit on that scale? And it's just like it's nowhere near the Tinder swindler, you know. And there are many other characters, you know, or people that we can think of like that as well. So the fact that you're even able to make the comparison obviously doesn't speak well of Tate, which I think obviously leads us on to the
The
ugly. So
ugly.
obviously we touched on this in both occasions, but is the fact that he was just an online pimp who managed
Yeah.
webcam girls. I mean, that is just it's not exactly, it's not good, is it? I mean, even if you're a diehard Tate fan, surely you would have wanted him to make his money, you know, by other means.
Selling umbrellas.
Yeah, selling our brothers, or you know,
Sweeping the
because
streets.
you know he'll say
Anything.
he was you know from you know single mum household when his parents divorced and so on, and then you know grew up in Luton, which is one of the roughest places in the UK, and you know poverty and hardship and you know welfare and all that stuff. And it's like, you know, going from that to becoming a four-time world kickboxing champion, that's quite inspiring, especially if he made, you know, it's pretty inspiring, you know, if especially if he had made all of his money from that. However, the fact that he hasn't made all of his money from that, and you know made it from the webcam stuff, and obviously he maintains that, you know, nothing illegal happened. They're all consenting adults, and they all made money. It's like, okay, well, you know, maybe, but I mean, the very nature of that kind of work is if it is, you know, exploitative in some way, shape, or form. You know, even if the individuals are consenting, they are still consenting to exploiting themselves, because no person who's compos mentis thinks, oh, you know what, I'm gonna sell my body to make a load of money. So. Yeah, and then obviously there's stuff which has kind of like come out about how he's kind of like operated, and again it's like how much stock you put in supposedly some of the text messages which has gone out, but one thing which can't be denied is the content which he said. So in the, I don't know,
Yeah.
obviously during this time, obviously he's done a number of interviews, one with Tucker Carlson, but the Candace Owens one, she challenges him on one particular thing he said about the webcam girls. He says, oh, you know, it's much easier to get a girl to do what you want them to do once you've had sex with them. And that just sounds like it just, you know, on the face of it, well, I mean, it sounds completely demonic. And he tries to say about, oh, you know, I'm talking about a very, you know, I'm talking about I'm in a relationship with these girls. I'm talking about the dynamics of dating, you know, a girl who's also a sex worker and so on and so forth. It's just like, okay, I mean, either way, it's all pretty immoral stuff. Even if it's not illegal, it's still immoral. And I think the fact that he's not kind of remorseful or repentant in any way, shape, or form about that. So like Candice would press him on these things, and she kind of tried to like make the comparison between like himself and then Jay-Z and 50 Cent, who made their first big bit of money by selling drugs. And it's just like, and she tried to say about how, okay, you could have someone who's, you know, a white picket fence conservative saying these things are bad, but you know, she would say like, oh, you know, I had a very hard upbringing, so someone who wasn't from that, you know, isn't going to inspire me. It's like, okay, well, you know, fair enough. If you had a hard upbringing and you overcame some things to make something of yourself, and obviously that's very inspiring. However, you know, lust of the eyes, lust of the flesh is, you know, or appealing to carnal pleasure is not the way. You know, that's path of least resistance stuff. It's like, okay, how can I get out of this situation as quick as possible? It's like, okay, there are obviously risks involved in selling drugs. You might go to jail, you might get stabbed, you might get beaten up. However, like, again, we were chatting earlier about David Goggins, who I would argue had more hardship than those three. Didn't choose the path of least resistance. You know, he didn't become a pimp and he didn't become a drug dealer. They certainly would have had opportunity to do so, knowing who his dad is. He chooses to join the military and make something of himself that way, and that is infinitely more inspiring than like someone who was a drug dealer and then went on to make music. You know, at least I find that more inspiring and more compelling, and I think those kind of people should be held up as models over 50 Cent, you know, and Tate in that regards.
100%. And I think Tate like right now he's someone, he doesn't like people who make excuses.
Yeah.
does he? But when asked hard questions of himself, that was basically his answer. Why did you go and do all those immoral things with webcams and porn? Oh, it's because I had a hard upbringing. And it's like, but from someone who doesn't really let people get away with excuses, that's like a strange excuse to kind of to make. So my ugly point was the lack of repentance. Because look, we all mess up, we all fall short, and I don't want to be out to get anyone, and like I'm sure Tate's done. If you were to compare my life with Tate, he's probably like achieved much more than I have. But where I feel he could be giving something really valuable, and he's chosen not to, is like the area of repentance, because so he's been in this webcam industry, and for some reason he's managed to get himself out of that, which I imagine would have been hard for him to do personally. Like, I'm imagining that he would have had to have done a bit of soul searching to make that kind of change. I would imagine that he would have needed to have seen like the error of his ways, and especially in our younger years as men, typically most of us do more stupid things when we're younger versus when we're older. Like, what I would really want to know, and what I think I would find helpful to learn more about as well, is what changes did he have to go through to make that that switch from the whole porn and internet world towards a world of kind of like motivational speaking and that kind of thing. That's really key information, and that the fact that he doesn't want to kind of share that journey, I really feel that's missing a trick. And then my suspicion becomes that actually a big part of his motivation seems to me that he just wants to make himself look good in front of a global audience. Maybe he's trying to mask over his shame from where he's gone wrong in the past, or maybe he's just guilty. And I guess I don't like the idea of someone who kind of hands out life advice just for their own benefit to make themselves look good. That seems to me to be an ugly thing to do. So that's my ugly.
I think also with the lack of transparency around not even the lack of transparency, like, because he will say like so Piers Morgan obviously challenged him on previous tweets and previous things that he said, and then kind of like, obviously as we alluded to in episode 1, he'll say stuff like, obviously I'm a different person now, but I don't want to sell out my former self, and so on and so forth. The only thing he seems to be publicly kind of like repentant / apologetic was the fact that he used to be an atheist. He'll say stuff, I used to be an atheist and I didn't believe in God, and I'm so ashamed of the stuff that I used to say about that. I used to say, God wasn't real, and I'm really ashamed about that. But then in regards to the sex work stuff, like apparently he isn't really ashamed about that. And I suppose like because you could make the case, and had a conversation with pastor friend who had a chat with a Romanian fellow about his thoughts on Tate. And one of the things, and I've thought this as well, is okay, well, if he does start to admit some sort of guilt about running a webcam business, does that then undermine his case? And maybe that's why he's kind of not saying about I wish I didn't do that, because then it's like, okay, well, he thinks in his mind maybe it starts to make him look guilty. But I think that at least there would be ways for him to phrase it without
like looking to appearing to cover up.
Yeah, exactly.
Or
so he could say
brush off.
like, which is congruent with stuff he said. You know, I used to be an atheist. I didn't have any religious beliefs, which I now have. Before, when I was young, I was very money driven, very money oriented. You know, obviously we didn't have a lot when I was growing up, hence why I became so money focused. And that was my sole priority, was just to make money. So I knew the fastest way to making money was this. I knew a bunch of beautiful women who are willing to get along. You know, we didn't do anything illegal. You know, everyone made lots of money. Everyone got paid. But obviously, I'm now a religious man, and had I had my religious views before, that's not something that I would have done, because it's not congruent with my religious beliefs. He could have said something to like that, which doesn't admit guilt to anything, illegal, but it just says, if I had my time again, I would not make my money that way, believing what I now believe, or something like, at least that's like quasi repentance or something.
That would be a reasonable concession.
And that'd be consistent with some of the things it said. It said it's stuff like, you know, had a very hard upbringing, and I did what was necessary to survive.
Get the violins out.
It's like, you did what was necessary to survive, and then I don't think becoming a pimp was necessary for survival. But hey.
Yeah, so if you're in a hard place, guys, don't become an online pimp.
Don't become a pimp or a drug dealer. You know.
Good. Okay. So now we're on to like the church's response.
Yeah.
So obviously, like, Tate has been fulfilling some need. He has, you know, the level of followers that he does. We've talked before about how we think the church should respond. And we've both got one idea on this.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think obviously we discussed before about how, you know, if young people in the young men, young lads in the church are finding something that Tate's saying compelling or appealing, then, you know, the pastor should not just dismiss them or be like, oh, he's absolutely bad. You know, should just be inquisitive. It's like, okay, you know, lads, you know, what are you finding, you know, what you're finding intriguing, you know, what are you finding helpful, which he's saying, or what he's doing, because, you know, it's because if you just instantly dismiss them or dismiss him, kind of like the hackles will go up, and, like, you know, the shutters will come down, and you're unable to dialogue with them. But if you start just asking questions, you know, open questions, because you actually want to know what it is they find appealing, then obviously they will answer, and then you get something to work with. But as we said, like last time, if the church was doing more to engage young men, then it wouldn't really need to worry about what Tate was saying, because they've got them in their pews, they're discipling them, and they're doing good work with men. Obviously, I mentioned last time about how, you know, some of the things that the church could do would be like mountain biking, rock climbing, going walking, you know, barbecuing beers, or something to appeal to men, to get men together.
Yeah, and you've started trying to organise some of this.
And I
yourself.
spoke to both the pastor and the associate pastor, it's vicar and associate vicar, Anglican Church, and they were both really keen to get something going. They both recognised the fact that, because they had a group of men who went away with their kids to a summer camp. So it was just men and their children went away, and they just found that because the men were away from wives, or away from wives and partners, well, I assume wives, that they just started opening up a bit more. So there's something about men being away from their wives, or just men together, in the context of just men and men, that they felt free to just start expressing some of the problems that they were going through, or some of the things they wanted to talk about. So obviously we touched on last time about how we all hear all the time that men don't talk, and again we discussed last time how that's a lie, and it's just that men are in a context where they're divorced from other men. So just get men together on a regular basis or semi-regular basis doing something somewhat challenging, and they will begin to open up, and they'll begin to talk. And, you know, that's young men, so, you know, teenagers to, you know, men in their 20s and 30s and older as well. Just get them together. So I think, you know, simply the church could just do that, and then it wouldn't need to worry about some of these other issues. But I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I mean, I love getting men together, and then getting real, talking about life, talking about spirituality. Having an activity to do is often the way to that men enjoy actually doing that, rather than say, right guys, we're all going to talk about our spiritual lives today.
It's not appealing.
Yeah, no, not appealing.
Well, I mean, one of the things that again I was chatting to our friend Pastor Jack about is this because obviously he's now gone full time and he's thinking about what he can do to start engaging some of
Yeah.
the young men at his church, and we're just saying about like how just make the activity the priority, kind of like, okay, we're just getting guys together to rock climb or to mountain bike or to paddleboard or to just have a beer and some barbecue,
Yeah.
or barbecue and some beers rather, and like what we called it, like by the way vicar or by the way pastor ministries, because like you get guys together there and if the vicar's there or whatever, they'll just start asking questions,
Yes.
and obviously then it can become quasi evangelistic, because it's like well, you're getting guys together who are biking. This is like, most men would probably enjoy a little cycle or a walk
Yeah.
or a bit of rock climbing, and then lo and behold, it's just like, your non-Christian friends hear about that, guys are gathering together and doing some cool activities, and it's like sooner or later, one of them might want to tag along.
Or maybe javelin throwing. I could do a javelin throwing one.
Oh, you could do.
I'm sure loads of people want to do that.
Okay.
Sorry, anyway.
Okay. Well, you can speak to your javelin coach about that.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, get men together and create those communities and those spaces for people to interact and to be men. Talk about life. Absolutely.
I think also what the church could do is as we discussed in episode 1 is just making like just portraying a more masculine view of Jesus, and just making the message that they're preaching just ask more of the people that attend your church, call them to some sort of adventure, challenge them in some way, shape or form, because the Christian life is meant to be a challenging life. It's it's narrow as the way.
Yeah, I think whenever I'm going somewhere, if I've got a job to do there, even if it's like, I don't know, put out the chairs, I'm much more likely to turn up to it and be engaged.
Yeah.
Probably I'll maybe arrive early because I'm thinking, I need to put out the chairs.
Yeah.
I'm included. I'm contributing to this thing. Whereas if I'm just there and I've just got to kind of like listen, I don't know, maybe I'll be a bit later. Maybe I won't be paying quite as much attention.
Yeah.
So yeah, let men own stuff. Let them participate. Challenge them. Yeah. Okay, so how should the church respond to the Tate phenomenon, as we've been talking about? Well, I would say that to start with, the church should agree and affirm Tate and what he stands for, to the extent that Tate is like Jesus. So I said at the start, like, he's articulate, he's forthright. Quite a few of the things that he says are true, and he doesn't back down from speaking truth, even if it will get him into trouble. And Jesus was like that. He gave some very, very hard-hitting messages.
Yeah, he wasn't afraid to offend, was he?
No, and it got him into trouble. It got him into trouble to the extent that he paid with his life. And maybe we can say that Tate, somewhat similarly, faces persecution. But then the church should also challenge Tate where he doesn't reflect Christ. For example, all of the persecution and hardship and rejection which came Jesus' way wasn't warranted, because Jesus was completely innocent. Not only had Jesus never done bad, but he'd only ever done good. And as a result, for that, a lot of people persecuted him. He paid with his life. Whereas with Tate, a lot of, it seems that he's done a fair amount. Everybody's fallen short of the standard of Jesus, but Tate has publicly, and I'm sort of criticizing him to this degree because he's a public figure, but he's definitely fallen short in terms of going into the webcam industries, and he's still falling short now because he's not sufficiently repentant. Like he needs to be teaching people that some of the stuff he's been involved with in the past is wrong.
Yeah.
Like whether or not he's moved on from it now,
Yeah.
because he's in that position of global role model, which he is, he has a responsibility to say, actually, no, that's wrong, that's very wrong, and here is why it's wrong. So the church needs to challenge Tate, and the church can basically say, look, this is wrong, because Jesus says it's wrong. Jesus honours and respects all people, and he honours and respects women, and that is not Jesus's plan for women, and that's not Jesus's plan for how men should treat women. And then stepping away from Tate and just going more towards masculinity and how should the church engage with men. I think that there is a lot of pressure on men to make something of themselves, and I think
I suppose just interjecting. I mean, I suppose you could add to some degree that perhaps people like Tate, though some people may find them helpful or motivational to get about and doing something, to some degree they could also add to that pressure, because if you're comparing yourself to, as we said, we discussed, we're similar ages to him, and he's achieved, well, at least on the surface, he's got a lot more money and a lot more cars and a lot more accolades. I'm not a 4-time world kickboxing champion, so if I start comparing myself to him in those regards, financially and materialistically, then it's like, well, I might end up feeling quite bad about myself, and that could end up adding to the pressure which I'm therefore feeling.
Yeah, well, 100%, and I think where the church can engage men is encouraging them in building a right life, which won't necessarily look like glitz and glamour. Many times it won't look like quick growth, quick results, results without much sacrifice. It won't look like that. But it needs to build this culture where we examine ourselves, and kind of as we grow as men on a shallow level, so maybe we get more money, maybe we get a promotion, maybe we get a girlfriend, maybe we make some new friends. As we grow on those shallower levels, the church needs to have that culture where even more we grow in our character, where we increasingly know that we're loved by God, we increasingly receive a vision for our life which is God-given and won't change, and we build a character which is kind of strong enough to deal with setbacks, but also with success, because success is one thing which can kind of corrupt us. If someone just handed me £5,000 today, what would I do with the rest of my day?
You often hear anecdotes of people who are broke or very poor, winning the lottery, and end up becoming bankrupt afterwards, because obviously they've just, they literally became an overnight success, and it broke them because obviously they had no depth of they weren't able to handle that level of success, because obviously they'd just been fast-tracked effectively. Yeah,
absolutely. And if you think of how Jesus was tempted in the wilderness by Satan. Satan tempted him with riches, and Satan tempted him with power, but Jesus's character was at the level where he was able to refuse those things, even at a time when he'd been out in the desert for 40 days, 40 nights, cold, weak, hungry. Jesus's character was strong enough to say, actually, no, I'm not selling out to those things. So the church needs to create that culture where people don't go for the great big platforms like Tate did, which I'd say is largely for his own gain, but they become more like Christ, and they take the path of the cross, and they take the path of suffering, and they essentially offer their lives to their community, to their family, offer their lives to the world for their good. And when anyone is able to do that, you've shown that you have in your heart the most valuable thing of all, that you have love. You have a love which is so powerful that you can lay down your life for others, and to me, that's the most motivating example of any role model who I've ever looked at and analysed. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, well, that's I think that's a good answer. Certainly, yeah. I mean, yeah, in regards to self-sacrifice, I think that's really key. I mean, I think we often hear what in church content, what does leadership look like, and so Christ's leadership, he said, he that is to be greatest among you needs to be servant of all. So Jesus modelled a servant-hearted kind of leadership and ministry as well. So yeah, certainly self-sacrifice and serving others, and it keeps you grounded, and it keeps you humble as well, because you're not trying to be exalted above anyone. You're trying to serve, and I think I really love how Bishop Barron summarizes love. He says love is willing the good of the other for their sake.
Yeah, for their sake.
Yeah. So which I think is really key. So I'm serving my church or my community, my family, for their sake, not for my own. And obviously there's a reciprocity within that, because you would hope that if you treat your family well and your friends well and your community well, you'd also be treated well in turn. But
doesn't always happen.
But it doesn't always happen. And if it doesn't, if the call is to carry on serving them lovingly regardless.
Yeah.
And I do think, as we've alluded to before, in regards to getting guys together and they're doing life together and doing hard things together, activities as well, and building that camaraderie amongst one another, you will start to, I think again, naturally, they will want to serve one another. So I think you can get both aspects. You get the servant-heartedness, and then you get guys getting together, doing life together, talking about the problems, talking about their struggles, and building deep and meaningful relationships as well. And as we said, in regards to the vicar or the pastors there as well, you get that by the way vicar ministries, and then those who aren't necessarily Christians, or those who are Christians who have some perhaps theological struggles or whatever, can get those answered along the way. So any final thoughts?
Well, what a powerful thing that would be if we all create that environment where we're serving each other. We might even change the world.
Who knows?
Okay, so we've done Tate. Those were our summarising thoughts. Next time in the Build Add the Shoe Hype podcast, we're going to explore the topic of prodigals. That is those who have come to faith in Jesus, but for whatever reason they have left the church. They're no longer meeting with other Christians, and what should the church do towards people in such a situation?
Indeed. We hope you enjoyed listening. This has been the Build Add the Shoe Hype, the podcast. Bye for now.
Bye for now.